She told me I was ruining the mood in front of a table full of people I didn't invite. My house, my wine, my food, her laughter, and not even the decency to lower her voice. I had barely said anything, just mentioned the music was a little loud for a dinner party, and suddenly I was the emotionally constipated husband dragging down her fun. You're ruining the mood again. Can you just go sulk somewhere else? She said it like I was a child. Worse, like I was an embarrassment she had to manage in front of her real life, her curated audience of coworkers, and overly charming just friends. One of them, tall guy with silver temples and a blazer 2 sizes too tight, smirked into his Pinot like they shared some inside joke. Maybe they did. I didn't say a word. Didn't throw a fit. Didn't break the wine glass I was gripping a little too tightly. I just stared at her for one long silent second. Then I turned, walked to the coat rack, grabbed my jacket, she always hated that old leather one, and headed for the door. Laughter still echoed as I stepped into the November air. The sky looked like wet cement, the kind of weather that presses on your chest without asking permission. It felt right. Funny thing about silence, people think it means weakness. They think if you don't fight back, you're backing down. But sometimes silence is the sound of the last fuse burning. That was the last night I played the background character in my own damn life. And hey, if this hits home for you, or you've ever stood in your own kitchen feeling like a stranger at someone else's party, do me one favor, subscribe. Seriously, more than 90% of folks read this stuff without hitting that button, and it's the fuel that keeps this whole thing running. It helps the team do more of these. All right, back to it. I didn't drive anywhere in particular, just kept going through the hills, past gas stations and closed diners, into roads where the street lights got scarce. I wasn't running away, and I wasn't waiting for her to call. I just needed to feel the engine hum under my hands and the road stretch out like something I still had control over. Because back inside that house, I didn't have control, not of the mood, not of the narrative, not of her. Heather used to be different, or maybe I used to believe better. Somewhere between year 12 and 20, her sarcasm got sharper and her respect duller. She stopped laughing with me and started laughing near me, then at me, and always when someone else was watching, especially him. His name was Cole, the guy from her design firm who couldn't stop touching her arm when he talked. Always some light touch, a little lean in, calling her HD, like he had a right to abbreviate her. She said he was married, then she said he was separated, then she said he was not really anyone to worry about. I wasn't worried. I was watching. It was always the same. She'd invite people over without asking, host these spontaneous little collab dinners. She'd dress just a little nicer than usual, always perfume, always the heels, the way her voice lifted when she told stories, the way she talked over me or cut me off with a joke that made them laugh. I wasn't Roger. I was set decoration, a stage prop that occasionally fetched wine. The last straw wasn't the insult. It was her eyes after it. Like I was inconveniencing her by being wounded, like I should be grateful I wasn't asked to leave sooner. I reached the truck, slid into the seat, and just sat there for a moment. No music, no GPS, just me and the thudding silence of someone finally understanding where they stood. I watched our kitchen window for a few minutes. She was back at the table, refilling glasses, telling some story about back in college, like I wasn't the man who paid off her loans and took her to every family funeral for 15 years. Like I was nobody. So I turned the key, backed out of the driveway, and kept going, not to punish her, not to make a scene. But because I finally realized something, you don't have to yell to leave. You don't need closure from someone who never offered respect. You don't even need to slam the door. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is say nothing at all and leave anyway. There's a difference between leaving and arriving somewhere else. Most people don't get that. They leave to escape, to flee something. But me? I left to find something I didn't even realize I was missing until the front door closed behind me, and the warmth of the house felt like someone else's comfort. I didn't drive to a buddy's place to vent, didn't hit up the usual diner with the greasy coffee and the waitress who flirts just enough to be polite. I didn't even consider a hotel. No, my hands knew where they were going before my mind caught up. The cabin, my uncle's old cabin, out by the northern ridge, tucked behind a row of long dead pines that hadn't stood straight in 30 years. No cell service, no neighbors, no internet, just timber, stone, and silence. I hadn't been there in over a year, not since I patched the roof last spring and stocked the pantry like I was preparing for a storm I didn't know was coming. Guess part of me already knew. The road there is rough, half gravel, half forgotten. It curves around like it's deliberately trying to shake you off. Heather always hated the place. Said it smelled like old books and dead things. That always made me laugh. What she meant was, it didn't have Wi-Fi, and nobody cared about her job title out there. Perfect. By the time I reached the cabin, the temperature had dipped into that bone-sharp kind of cold that slaps you awake. I parked, walked up the short path with the broken stepping stones, and opened the door. Still smelled like dust and cedar and something vaguely animal, but not in a bad way. Familiar, honest. I lit a fire the old-fashioned way. No starter log, just kindling, matches, and muscle memory. Sat down in the old leather chair that creaked like it had been waiting for someone to remember it existed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into the void. I didn't throw anything. I just sat. And the silence, it wasn't empty. It was alive. No distant laughter. No fake chuckles from people who knew nothing about me. No wine glasses clinking around some half-baked work celebration. Just the soft pop of the fire and the wind pushing against the cabin walls like it was trying to see if I still remembered how to be alone. I took out my phone once. Just once. 12:18 a.m. No messages. Not even from her. That stung for about half a second. Then I smiled, turned the phone off, laid its screen down on the table like it didn't own me anymore. It's amazing how quickly your body adjusts to stillness when it hasn't had it in years. My hands stopped clenching, my jaw loosened, even my back, which had carried 1,000 tiny humiliations without bending, seemed to settle. I wasn't sulking. I wasn't making some grand gesture. I wasn't trying to teach her a lesson or provoke guilt. That would require me still wanting something from her. No, this wasn't protest. It was permission. Finally giving myself permission to stop being the quiet punching bag, the dull fixture, the man who compromised until there was nothing left but a husband-shaped shadow. I made tea, no fancy blend, just a dusty tin of black tea and boiled water, sat with it steaming between my hands. Thought about how Heather would have rolled her eyes at the chipped mug. "Why don't you just bring real cups next time?" she used to say. "Because this is a real cup. This is a real place. This is a real moment." I looked around the cabin and noticed things I hadn't seen in years. A hunting knife still in its sheath on the mantel. My uncle's old flannel shirt hanging by the door. The photograph I had left behind. Me and my father fishing before life got complicated and people started measuring love in calendar invites and text tone. Out there, away from the noise, away from the curated performances and obligatory work friends, I remembered something vital. I'm not a prop, I'm a person. And the saddest part, it took a slap of humiliation to realize that I'd been standing still while my own story was being written without me. I stoked the fire one more time, leaned back in that chair, and closed my eyes. Not because I was exhausted, but because for once I wasn't on guard. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming a place where my voice didn't have to fight to be heard, where silence wasn't a punishment, but a homecoming. The sky cracked open at dawn with that pale, indifferent gray that always feels like a hangover you didn't drink for. The kind of light that doesn't warm anything, just exposes it. I sat on the cabin's front step, boots resting on cold wood, a half-drunk thermos of coffee beside me, steam winding upward like it was in no rush to vanish. My shoulders didn't feel heavy anymore, just still. That's when I figured it was time. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket, still dead silent and black-screened. Held it in my palm for a second longer than I meant to, like I was cradling a grenade, then pressed the power button. The thing lit up like it had been waiting to scold me. Buzz, 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 buzz. 45 missed calls, 12 voicemails, texts so long they had scroll bars, and it wasn't even 7 o'clock a.m. yet. I let it buzz out. No reaction, just watched the chaos unfold in real time. Notifications stacked like dominoes, her name again and again, then unknown number, then Heather, too. She changed her contact photo at some point, a selfie in our kitchen, forced smile, red lipstick, trying too hard. First message was timestamped 10:23 p.m. Real mature, just walk away, huh? Like a child. Second, everyone noticed. Hope you're proud of the scene you made. Then, fine, stay gone, I don't care. And then, a shift. Around midnight, okay, seriously. Where are you? I'm worried. 12:31 a.m. Please just text back. 12:52. Are you safe? Are you with someone? 1:15. Roger. Come on. I didn't mean it like that. You always do this. Shut down. Make everything so dramatic. 209, can we talk, please? 422, I'm sorry. 547, I didn't mean it. I opened the voicemail app, let the first one play. Hey, I know you're mad, but this is just, it's blown out of proportion. You can't just vanish, okay? That's not fair. Not to me. The second was angrier. The third was silence. Just background noises, shuffling, maybe a door closing. The fourth? She was crying. Real tears, not performative sniffles. This wasn't Heather at brunch crying. This was something guttural, messy, raw. She said my name twice like she forgot it the first time. Roger, I don't know what happened. I didn't mean it. We were just having fun and please come home. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I paused the message halfway through, not out of cruelty, just didn't want to hear the rest. See, Heather had mastered performance years ago, could flip between flirty, sharp, cold, and vulnerable like it was wardrobe. But that message, it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded scared, like someone realizing too late that the foundation wasn't just cracked, it was already gone. And still, I felt nothing, not joy, not rage, not vindication, just clarity. Because the thing is, when a person is used to yelling into a storm and always getting thunder back, silence disorients them. It's not passive, it's surgical. It forces them to hear themselves without the feedback loop. Heather didn't expect silence. She expected a fight, a dramatic exit followed by a dramatic return. She expected me to come back in with an apology or a list of things she'd done wrong so she could pick them apart and make it about my control issues. Instead, she got this, me, quiet, calm, and gone. I didn't text back. I didn't listen to the rest of the voicemails. I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat of the truck and sat for a moment longer, watching a squirrel skitter across the frost-covered gravel. Even the wildlife seemed to be minding its own business for once. I remembered something an old mentor told me once, back when I still thought compromise was a virtue that could save anything. When someone shows you their version of peace, pay attention to whose silence they're trying to silence. Heather's version of peace always involved me giving up ground. Mine just needed her to stop talking long enough for me to remember I had legs. As I turned the ignition and began driving back toward town, the phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I already knew the script. Guilt, panic, justification, bargaining. But none of it would work. Not because I hated her, but because I finally didn't owe her a reaction. I wasn't retreating. I wasn't sulking. I was driving back into a world where I didn't need to be smaller or just to make her feel more interesting. And for the first time in a long time, the road felt wide open. Walter always brewed his coffee like it was a challenge to your arteries, thick, burnt, and somehow still too watery. But the man had a way of speaking that made it worth sipping. We sat on his back porch that afternoon, same two worn-down chairs we'd fixed a dozen times, looking out over his half-dead tomato plants and the rusting frame of an old swing set his grandkids never visited enough. He didn't ask why I'd stopped by, just poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest, Dad," and handed it over like we did this every Sunday. "Long night?" he asked without looking at me. "Long enough." He nodded like that answered everything. In Walter's world, you didn't need to spell things out, just needed to show up with the kind of silence that said something had shifted. We talked about nothing for a while. Weather, gas prices, his knees. But then he leaned back, scratched his neck, and said something that landed like a pin pulled from a grenade. "You should have heard Ellen last month." My hand paused mid-sip. I didn't look up. "What about her?" "She was drunk. 4th glass of wine deep, maybe 5th. They were out here after that garden party Heather threw. You know, the one where everyone brought some overpriced cheese and pretended to like it." I nodded. I remembered. That party had cost me $600 and 3 hours of pretending to enjoy oat milk brie. Walter continued. "They were laughing about something about Cole, that guy from her design firm. Ellen said something like, well, as long as Heather keeps her story straight, Roger won't have a clue. And then they all laughed like hyenas on a sitcom laugh track." He glanced at me. Didn't sit right. Even the damn tomatoes curled up a bit. I didn't react. Just let the words hang between us like smoke from a cheap cigar. Walter didn't press. He never did, just shifted topics back to his leaking roof like he hadn't just detonated my Sunday. But I wasn't hearing about shingles and flashing. I was hearing Heather's laugh. Too sharp, too performative, the way Cole always stood too close. The late meetings, the sudden interest in Pilates, which she'd always said was a scam for flexible influencers. That night, I didn't go home. I went to my office, pulled out my old laptop, one she didn't know still worked, booted it up, slow as hell, with that humming noise that sounds like it's trying to remember how to breathe. I opened our shared bank account first. Nothing obvious. Then I pulled up the credit card statements and scrolled. Past groceries, fuel, household crap. Then I started seeing repeats. Cafe Vivant. 4 times in 1 week. Heather hated that place. Too bitter, not enough syrup, she'd said. Astoria Winehouse. A Tuesday, a Thursday. We never went out midweek. Then came the Civic Hotel, room service charges under her name on weekends she claimed were team-building retreats. Not company paid either. Personal card. My chest stayed still. No panic. Just a new kind of focus, like tightening screws on a loose door frame. I pulled phone records. Had to reset the password first. Something she hadn't changed yet. Once inside, I filtered for incoming and outgoing numbers. One in particular stood out. A 917 area code. Showed up often, mostly late at night. Some calls were short, some dragged to the 40-minute mark. Sometimes more than once a day. I cross-referenced it with my memory, then the design firm's team page. Cole, of course. I kept clicking. Looked for receipts, appointments, patterns, a boutique jewelry shop. Twice, once in July, once in September. I zoomed in on the date in July. Our anniversary was that week. She came home exhausted from a team dinner that night. Didn't even remember it was our date until the next morning. Gave me a card that looked like it was bought at a gas station. I chalked it up to stress. Now it read differently. Not anger, not betrayal, just clarity. Like finally realizing a picture you've stared at for years was upside down the whole time. I sat back in the chair. The screen glowed in the dark, illuminating a man who'd been a ghost in his own life. But now the ghost was watching. Still, I didn't confront her. No rage texts, no tearful calls. Because Heather didn't know yet that the silence wasn't passive. It was collecting, learning, watching. She wanted to make me invisible, but she forgot ghosts see everything. The first time I opened the camera footage, it didn't even feel like revenge. It felt like reviewing a security feed after a break-in. You don't go looking for justice. You go looking for proof that you weren't crazy, that the crack in the window didn't just happen, that the drawer didn't open itself, that the damage was real and it had a face. I had installed the motion-triggered camera in the den 6 months earlier, back when Heather's calendar became more fluid. She'd been working late with her creative team, which sounded like a poorly written alibi even at the time. But instead of confronting her, I just listened, agreed with everything, encouraged her passion for collaboration, quietly installed the camera and told her it was for package theft. She didn't question it. Why would she? I was the man who always blinked first, who always backed down, who said, "Okay, babe," and meant don't make this harder than it has to be. I opened the file directory and saw the dates stacked neatly, hundreds of clips. Most were mundane, dust floating through light, a raccoon tapping the glass one night, me walking through the room, maybe once or twice, Heather on the phone. But then I clicked on one from 2 months ago. Timestamp, Friday, 8:42 p.m. The frame opens with the door swinging in. Heather enters, coat draped over her arm, heels clicking like punctuation. She's not alone. Cole. I didn't need a name tag to confirm it. Tall, smirking, he had the swagger of a man who believed he belonged in other people's homes. That alone was enough to peg him as the type. They walked in like they'd done it before. Heather beelined for the bar cart, poured 2 glasses of red. No hesitation, no awkward tension of first-time trespass. No talk about marketing strategy, client pitches, or team synergy. Just wine, low voices, too close seating. I watched as she tucked her legs up beneath her like she always did when she got comfortable. She touched his knee. He didn't flinch. I muted the clip, not because I couldn't bear the sound, but because I didn't want to humanize them. I wanted to watch the choreography of it, the body language, the rhythms of 2 people who thought they were alone. 10 minutes in, she leaned in and laughed. That throw your head back kind of laugh. The one she used to save for late nights on our porch when we were still figuring each other out. She never laughed like that with me anymore. Not for years. The next clip was from a week later. Same setup, same time, different clothes. She walked in alone this time, phone pressed to her ear. The camera caught her perfectly in frame as she dropped her bag on the floor and said into the phone, "He's so boring sometimes, it's like talking to a wall." Silence. Then laughter. She turned, walking toward the bar cart again. "Yeah," she continued, "but it's easier this way. He never asks questions. He just folds." I didn't pause, didn't fast forward, just let it play, hands resting on the desk like I was watching a corporate training video I couldn't skip. It wasn't heartbreak, it wasn't fury, it was colder than that. Clinical, like reading your own autopsy report and nodding in agreement. I replayed the second clip once more, not because I needed to verify, but because repetition burns clarity into your bones. Then I opened a folder on the desktop, created a new subfolder, labeled it Monday, dragged both clips in. It was a habit, really. The labeling. Monday was the day she always claimed she had evening strategy calls. Monday was the night I started taking longer showers just to avoid her passive sighs and exaggerated yawns. Now Monday had receipts. I didn't plan what to do with the footage. Not yet. It wasn't a weapon. It was an archive, a record of the moment the narrative turned, the moment her joke about talking to a wall stopped being insult and started being irony, because the wall was listening now, and it wasn't made of plaster. It was made of silence, of cameras, of a man she thought would never bother checking the facts. She thought silence meant submission. She never understood. It was preparation. And the wall she mocked, it was learning how to echo. By noon the next day, Heather began what I can only describe as her greatest performance yet, the illusion of normalcy. The first text came in just as I was finishing a sandwich at the cabin, one of those sad, fridge-borne things made from half-stale bread and a slice of prepackaged cheese that probably expired last month. But it tasted better than anything she'd cooked in the last year, probably because it came without side orders of sarcasm or condescension. Her message lit up my phone. "Heather, come home. Let's talk. I made your favorite." No mention of the night I left. No mention of the 45 missed calls. No reference to the voice crack in her sobbing voicemail. Just a dinner invite wrapped in a smiley face. Like the past 48 hours were a small misunderstanding, a dropped call, as if silence was just a mood, not a message. I stared at the text for a second, then typed back, "Roger, not hungry." That was it. 2 words, clean, unemotional, the kind of reply that doesn't invite further conversation. It closes the door gently and quietly clicks the lock. 5 minutes later, another text, this time a photo. Heather in the hallway mirror, holding my old college hoodie up to her chest like some kind of nostalgic hostage situation. The same hoodie she once called juvenile and said made me look like a man trying to avoid aging. Now it was a prop. Soft lighting, pouty eyes. I could practically smell the desperation through the screen. Still, I didn't respond. She called once, ignored. Called again, declined. Third call. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. The notification hit almost immediately. New voicemail from Heather. Didn't listen to it. Then came the final message. No emojis, no punctuation tricks, no sweetness. "Heather, what do you want from me?" Ah, there it was. The turn. Not an apology, not accountability. A demand. Cloaked in vulnerability, but still a demand. Because Heather didn't know how to operate without control. The emotional steering wheel had always been hers, and she was suddenly realizing the dashboard was dark, the tires were gone, and the engine didn't start unless I wanted it to. I took my time replying, watched the fire in the wood stove settle into embers, listened to the ticking of the old clock on the mantel, the one she once called creepy and tried to convince me to toss. I let the silence stretch like a rubber band, just until it was ready to snap. Then I typed, "Roger, peace." One word. I didn't send anything else. Didn't clarify, because it said everything. I wanted peace. Not apologies, not tears. Not her curled up in a hoodie pretending she remembered who I used to be. Not intimacy as repair. Just silence. Stillness. A life where I didn't have to brace for the next belittling comment tossed between spoonfuls of risotto. The kind of peace that comes not from forgiveness, but from distance. What she didn't realize, and maybe never would, is that peace isn't always mutual. Sometimes one person gets it when the other loses it. And right now, Heather was unraveling, slowly, beautifully, like a cocktail dress caught in a bonfire. I didn't feel bad. Why should I? For years, I'd been the ballast in her chaos, the predictable man she could mock in front of friends to feel clever, the loyal, dull husband who didn't ask questions when hotel charges hit the statement or when she started locking her phone at night, the boring one. Well, now the boring man was unbothered, unreachable, and uncooperative. And the woman who always thought she had the upper hand, she was holding a knife with no one left to stab but herself. The best part? She still didn't understand that not responding was the response. Heather always believed her greatest currency was charm, that brittle, high-gloss persona she carried like a designer clutch, effortless in public, acid behind closed doors. She used it like a scalpel, slicing through boardrooms, brunch tables, and social gatherings with precision. When someone laughed at her jokes, she wasn't hearing the humor, she was taking inventory. And for years, I watched her sharpen that persona, sand down every edge that hinted at real vulnerability. All she needed was a captive audience. But audiences vanish when the lights go out. And I had started flipping switches. It began small, just a whisper of rot beneath the surface. A digital whisper, to be exact. One of her co-workers, Julia, had always been the sympathetic one, the kind of woman who said things like marriage is hard over happy hour cocktails, while clearly wondering how Heather had landed a husband who didn't drink, didn't stray, and didn't argue. I knew her work email. I'd seen it once on a party RSVP Heather left open on the laptop. So I sent it. The first clip. Just a few seconds of Heather and Cole in the den, wine glasses clinking, her fingers trailing down his wrist as she laughed. That laugh. No caption. No explanation. Just the truth. Uncut. Sent from an anonymous burner address I created while sipping coffee in the cabin. Subject line. Thought you should know what collaboration looks like after hours. I didn't expect a reply. Didn't want one. Just wanted the image to plant itself and fester. A week later, Heather came home from work unusually early. No triumphant phone calls about crushing her pitch. No gloating about how the creative director couldn't breathe without her opinion. She sat in silence on the couch, tried to play it off like she was tired, but I could see it. Something had cracked. 2 days later, I sent the second package. Her gym had a strict policy about unauthorized guests, members only after 9 p.m., and everyone had to swipe in. Funny thing, security cameras don't lie. Especially not when you request footage anonymously with a timestamp and a heads up about policy violations. Heather entering through the side door with Cole in tow, his badge never scanned, her body language way too familiar for spotting form. That one went straight to the gym's HR inbox. A few more days passed, then the whispers started. At work, the usual greetings thinned. Text replies slowed to a crawl. Lunch invites stopped coming. Meetings were shorter, tighter. Her boss stopped including her in client dinners, the same ones she used to gloat about securing. Heather assumed it was jealousy, said as much aloud when I asked why she seemed off. They're just intimidated, she told me, swirling a glass of wine like she was auditioning for a reality show confessional. It's lonely at the top, but I knew better. The thing about curated lives is they require constant polishing. One scratch, one stain, and the whole image starts to unravel. Ellen was the one who finally said something. Heather cornered her in the parking lot after work, said everyone was acting weird, that people were being distant. Ellen, bless her unfiltered soul, didn't even sugarcoat it. Maybe they saw who you really are. That's all she said. Then she got in her car and drove off. Heather came home that night and slammed the fridge shut like it owed her answers. She paced, huffed, pretended to call someone, then hung up halfway through the first ring. She dropped her phone on the counter and looked at me like I was supposed to ask what was wrong. I didn't, because I already knew. I watched her drift through that week like a ghost wearing her own skin, angry but aimless. She wore louder clothes, pushed extra hard at the gym, posted 2 selfies a day, quotes about resilience and truth always rising, the usual fog machine for someone who senses the stage lights dimming but still thinks they can force an encore. But this wasn't a story where the audience begged for more. This was a slow fade to black. She didn't know yet that the people she built her world around weren't loyal, they were just entertained. And now that the act had cracked, the crowd was slipping out the side doors, not with booze, just quiet exits, the same kind she used to accuse me of when I left a dinner party early. But now the silence wasn't mine, it was hers. The elevator ride up to the 10th floor was so quiet, it felt like a confession booth. No music, just the low hum of machinery and my reflection in the brushed metal walls. Older, yes, but calm, settled, like I had finally stopped bleeding energy into people who mistook my silence for emptiness. The office was sleek, minimal, professional. Glass doors, dark wood trim, and a wall of succulents that looked like they hadn't needed human interaction in months. A young assistant with perfect posture led me down a hallway and into a room that didn't smell like ego. It smelled like ink, old leather, and consequences. Across the table sat a woman named Margaret Lee. Early 40s, charcoal suit, no jewelry except a thin platinum watch. She didn't smile when she greeted me, didn't need to. Margaret wasn't hired for bedside manner. She was hired because she'd once helped my friend Richard dissolve a joint business before his ex could turn it into a hostage negotiation. She gestured to the stack of documents in front of her. "We're ready if you are." I nodded, no dramatics, no sigh. Just picked up the pen and began signing. It wasn't a divorce, not yet. Heather didn't know that part of the chessboard was even in play. What this was, in Margaret's words, was a strategic firewall, a quiet restructuring of every piece of my life she had conveniently forgotten wasn't hers to manage. First, the assets. My uncle's inheritance, 2 investment accounts, a small portfolio of industrial properties, and of course the cabin, had always been in my name. But now, with Heather's laughter echoing in my memory as she stroked someone else's wrist in my den, it felt reckless to keep anything exposed, so I moved them, all of it, into a trust managed by my sister, Elaine, CPA, mother of 3, and the one person in the family Heather never tried to manipulate. Elaine had seen through her from the beginning, once called her a hand grenade with glitter polish. Now she was trustee of everything Heather never knew existed. Margaret slid over the final document. "This is the clause that removes any claim of marital contribution. Since all assets predate the marriage, it's airtight." I signed it without blinking. Next came the cabin. Technically, it had always been separate, but now it had paperwork to match, designated as private property under the trust umbrella. Not marital, not shared, not discoverable without a very expensive lawyer and a very invasive court process, neither of which Heather would stomach unless her pride outweighed her bank account. And with the way her office had gone cold lately, I doubted she had the social capital left to burn. Lastly, the wild card. Margaret tapped a final tabbed page. "Security documentation?" I nodded, just in case. The den footage, labeled, dated, and backed up in 3 separate places. A digital ledger of Heather's loyalty, or lack of it, not for court, not yet. But if she ever turned this Cold War into a hot one, I wasn't walking in unarmed. She still didn't know about the camera, or the trust, or the accounts that had already been drained of joint access weeks ago, masked by routine maintenance emails she never read. She didn't know because I hadn't reacted, I hadn't shouted, hadn't accused, hadn't played into the script she had memorized and weaponized for years. Heather always expected me to take the hit, absorb the shock, and come crawling back with logic and compromise. That was her favorite move. Provocation by humiliation, followed by emotional negotiation. She liked me tired. That's how she stayed in control. But I wasn't tired anymore. I was methodical. I was moving pieces while she was busy performing for an audience that had already left the theater. When I stood to leave, Margaret gave the first smile I'd seen from her all morning. "It's rare," she said, "seeing someone come in this prepared." I shrugged. "It's been building for a while." She tilted her head. "You want to pull the trigger on a full divorce?" "Not yet," I said. "She's still busy pretending everything's fine." Let her. And that was the truth of it. Let her play house in a home she no longer owned. Let her microwave meals in a kitchen built on fiction. Let her wear my hoodie, text her friends, post her quotes, and spin her narratives. I wasn't responding. I was restructuring. And while she was watching for fireworks, I was laying foundation. Not for war, for freedom. The text came late in the afternoon. "Heather, dinner tonight? Just us, no drama, I promise." I stared at it for a long moment. The kind of message that comes when someone's losing control of the narrative and hoping sentiment will patch the holes. No smiley face this time, no coyness, just tired words. I knew what this was. She wasn't reaching out, she was reaching back. Back to the last version of me she still believed she could summon with a decent meal and misty eyes. The man who didn't ask questions. The man who folded, smiled, ate whatever was served, and stayed for dessert, even if it tasted like guilt. But I was curious. Not hopeful, just curious. So I went. The house looked different, cleaner, like she'd tried to erase whatever scent he'd left behind. Candles flickered in the dining room, real ones, not the usual LED knockoffs she used when she didn't want to deal with wax. Music played low, jazz. She always played jazz when she was pretending to be composed. I stepped in without ringing the bell. It was still my house, technically, my name on the deed, my money in the walls. But it didn't feel like mine. Not anymore. Heather stood near the table, hands clasped in front of her like a hostess at a restaurant trying to impress a food critic. She wore that navy dress she always swore was too formal for the house, and her hair was pulled back like she'd stepped out of one of her filtered LinkedIn profile pictures. She smiled, small and trembly. "Hi." I nodded, said nothing. Dinner was salmon, asparagus, a bottle of wine already breathing. I sat down and let her pour. I cut into the food and took a bite. It was good, seasoned, the kind of meal you make when you want someone to remember you know how to care. She kept glancing up like she was waiting for a cue. "So," she started, forcing lightness, "I've been thinking about us." I didn't respond. She tried again. "This house is too quiet without you. I didn't think it would be, but..." Another pause. She reached for her wine, then changed her mind. "I made mistakes," she said, a little too loud, then softer. "I know I did. But you shutting down like this, it's like you're punishing me instead of talking to me." Still, I said nothing. She set her fork down, leaned in. "Roger, come on. This cold thing you're doing, this isn't you." That was the moment she cracked. Tears welled up, real ones this time. Not performative mist, but heavy drops that caught the candlelight. Her voice broke. "I messed up, okay? I thought I could handle everything. Work, us, the stress. I was stupid. I was cruel. I know you saw something, heard something, or maybe someone told you." She stopped herself, watched me, and I looked right back at her. Not angry, not blank, just present. Finally, I picked up my napkin, wiped my mouth, stood. "Thank you for dinner," I said. It was quiet. She stood too, desperate. "Wait, just wait. Are you coming back?" Her voice was brittle, like she was asking a magic 8-ball and praying for try again later. I looked at her, really looked, the effort, the panic behind her eyes, the way her hands trembled just slightly when she tried to clasp them again. For a second I saw the Heather I married, then I saw the Heather I survived. "No," I said, "I never left where I truly belonged." And I walked past her, through the hallway I once painted, past the art she picked out but never really liked, past the scent of her expensive candle that tried too hard to smell like serenity, out the door, into the cool air. There was no dramatic slam, no car peeling away, just the soft click of the door and the realization that Heather wasn't watching me leave. She was watching the version of herself she only knew in relation to me dissolve, quietly, cleanly, and forever. And for the first time, she couldn't follow. The air at the cabin felt different this time. Not colder, not sharper, just clearer, like the fog of too many years had finally lifted. I stood at the stove while the kettle hissed, old hands wrapped around the worn handle of my favorite tin mug, the same one Heather once called a camping souvenir disguised as trash. I smiled at that. Funny how something mocked can become sacred once you've cut the laugh track. Outside, the frost had melted just enough to make the deck slick. I stepped out slowly, coffee in hand, breath fogging the glass door behind me. A red cardinal landed on the railing, puffed up and defiant in the chill. It sat there eyeing me like it knew everything, like it had watched the whole thing from a branch just outside the frame. We nodded at each other in mutual understanding. The phone buzzed on the windowsill. Just once. I let it sit there for a few moments. No rush. I already knew who it was before I picked it up. "Heather, I didn't think you'd actually leave me." The words hit like a child's final plea. Not because they were innocent, but because they came too late. I read it twice, not for clarity, just to let the shape of it sink in. I typed slowly, each letter a full breath. Roger, you didn't. You pushed me toward something better. No send-off, no punctuation dramatics, just the truth, plain and settled. I set the phone face down again, let the fire inside crackle back to life. There was no satisfaction in her pain. That would have made this a game, and I never played games. I just stopped participating in hers. She didn't lose me to someone else. She lost me to the silence she thought she controlled, the same silence she ridiculed and filled with her own noise. But now it wasn't a void. It was space, room to breathe, to exist, to be. I didn't check for a reply, didn't keep the phone in sight. I didn't need to. That chapter was done. Not burned, not ripped, just closed. The wind rustled the trees and the cardinal flitted away. I took a sip of coffee, strong, bitter, no cream, and let it warm the back of my throat like resolve. This place didn't ask anything of me. No conditions, no performative apologies, no mental gymnastics to interpret a tone or anticipate a dig hidden inside a compliment. Just me, the wood smoke, and the sound of everything I forgot I needed. No calendar alerts, no couples dinners, no scheduled intimacy, just mornings like this. Quiet, slow, and mine. I stepped back inside, stoked the fire, folded an extra blanket over the couch, picked up the book I never finished, not because it was bad, but because years ago, someone told me it was too slow. Turns out, slow is exactly what I needed. Outside, the world would keep spinning. Heather would keep explaining, spinning stories, maybe telling her friends I'd snapped or become cold or checked out. Let her. Let them. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to fix, no more debates over tone or tension or calendars or working late, just this, one cabin, one fire, one cup of coffee, and peace, not the dramatic, cinematic kind, the real kind, the kind you don't beg for, the kind you reclaim.